Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast, where we discuss business solutions to help listeners develop and implement action plans for true lean process improvement. I am your host, Patrick Adams. Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My guest today is Catherine McDonald. Catherine is a lean and leadership coach. Her work involves training and coaching executives and teams in organizations of all types and sizes. In 2018, Catherine started her own business, MCD Consulting, where she works as a lean and leadership coach. She specializes in lean deployment in non-manufacturing industries, including food, retail, education, nonprofit, healthcare, event management, hospitality. The list goes on. So welcome to the show, Catherine.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks a million.
Well, I'm delighted to have you on, Catherine. And I mentioned that you are in the non-manufacturing industry. Can you expand on that just a little bit? So just so our listeners understand, kind of where your background is, and just maybe give us a little bit of view into your past so we understand kind of who we're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do specialize in non-manufacturing. Reason being, I spent probably the first 5-6 years of my career in the hospitality sector, working in hotels, bars, restaurants. And then from there, I spent 13 years in the nonprofit sector. So I suppose I fully understand the need for lean in those services. And I also enjoy going in and working with those types of industries because I have a background, I have knowledge of the industry. And I do think that's important when it comes to consultancy and coaching and helping businesses. So yeah, absolutely. That's where I prefer to be.
Absolutely. And obviously, maybe some people can hear the difference in our accents. So you're not in the U.S. So can you tell us maybe where you're zooming in from today?
Yeah, I'm zooming in from a place called Newbridge, which is in County Kildare in Ireland. Yes.
Love it. Love it. Now, Ireland, before we hit record, I was telling you, Ireland is one of those countries that I've never visited, but it's on my bucket list. I would love to come to Ireland and visit. And I've heard from many people that the hospitality there is just amazing. Like you people kind of open their doors. They're very friendly. Is that really the case?
Yeah, it like people are really friendly. I think we're very laid back nation. We like fun. We like to chill. We also work really hard, but I think the Irish people have a really good balance, between work and play. So yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
Love it. Love it. And I also know that in Ireland, I know of many companies that are doing some amazing work from a continuous improvement perspective. I've seen lots of amazing best practices coming out of organizations in Ireland. So what's your secret over there? Is there just this lean or CI culture that's spreading through the country, or what's happening?
I think the secret is that we are people. So we're very good at relationships. We're very good at talking to people. We're very good listeners. And I think that's always the key to effective lean. It's getting to know people, getting to know people's needs before you go in trying to change anything. It's getting a really good idea of what people are all about and what organizations are all about. And I think that's, the Irish are probably very good at that, which absolutely helps.
Oh, I love that. And because I think about in the US with so many organizations that struggle with lean deployment because they're so focused on the tools. And you didn't mention the tools not one time in that explanation of why organizations are having success in Ireland. And you specifically talked about culture and people. And so I just love that. I think that's something we all need to key in on. And so I guess that leads me into my first question for you, Catherine. You've worked in lots of different organizational contexts. And so I'm curious to hear from you, what do you see as those key principles, practices of lean management, and how can those be effectively applied, within those different organizational contexts?
Yeah, so I mean, like I studied lean like a lot of other lean consultants, and at the time I would have learned about, main lean principles being value streams, pull, elimination of waste, continuous improvement, and all these things are really, really important. You can't be lean without those things. But at the back of my mind, I suppose I have other principles as well. And I think those principles are involvement of people, not just involvement of people, engagement, empowerment of people, the provision of autonomy within continuous improvement, almost this idea of sharing out the leadership when it comes to lean, of helping people to become masters of their own processes and owners of their own processes. And I think they are the principles that I follow when I go into any organization. And I think that's then what helps me to be able to deploy lean in any type of organization, because it's not about, a lot of people wouldn't understand the lean language as such. I think you have to get down to where people are at, how they work, how they speak, and really get to know them, involve them, and make it very simple for people. And I think when you do that, and you draw out their needs and you draw out where you feel the opportunities for improvement are, and then it's just so much easier to explain tools to them and get them to see waste. But I think that's really important first and foremost, is to get to know them and bring out the people side of lean.
Yeah. Do you feel that are there challenges that come with with doing that? Are there challenges that come with I guess for some organizations that I've worked with, there seems to be almost this wall between the office or leadership and the people that are closest to the value add work, right? This like imaginary wall, and trying to break that down and understand both sides of that can sometimes be challenging, and just working with humans in general can be challenging. What do you have examples of maybe some challenges, or even some success stories of you working with these companies, applying these different principles and practices? Anything at all that comes to mind?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there are challenges. There's so many challenges, and sometimes you go into work with an organization and it doesn't work out the way that you think it will, and you come up against situations that you really don't know how you're going to get around. So yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example of an organization I've been working with for a couple of years now. What we wanted to work didn't work really in the first year, because what happened was the leadership team wanted to work with me. They wanted to, map out processes with me. They wanted to create standards, and they wanted then to give these to people for people to follow. So, obviously I see the dangers in that. I'm aware of the need to involve people. But I kind of said, okay, I'm going to start from where they're at. I'll kind of work with them. I'll show them what lean is all about. I'll train them. And I couldn't get past this kind of idea that they had, that this was how it's going to work. So I said, well, we'll go with it. So what happened was, obviously, that they sat in their offices and they learned about lean, and they tried to, I suppose, enforce these principles and SOPs on people. And they just got such little results from it. And, I didn't mind them coming back to me and saying, this isn't working, because I was able to highlight at the beginning what we need in order to work. So the good news is, about a year on in, they've completely changed. It's a service sector. They're busy, which is why they didn't, they felt they couldn't stop people or pull people away from work, because, the work had to happen. So now they have completely changed their mindset. They tried it, they saw that it didn't work, and now they understand why. So there was learning and all of that as well. So now it's working really well. We've got all the different teams, cross-departmental teams, just downing tools just for short periods to map processes and understand what's working well and see what could work better and come up with action plans. And we've got systems in place to revisit all of this, and we've got things moving and happening. And actually, that particular company saved about 100,000 over the last 2 years, because they have reduced their customer complaints, and they've decreased their errors, and they've made huge changes as a result of the people who are doing the work actually changing their behaviors. And that all only happens when you involve them in the work and they feel that they have control and ownership of it. So yes, that was a struggle, a real struggle, but I sometimes think you just have to let people do things and see what doesn't work in order to find what does work.
Wow, that's a powerful story, and obviously a lot of work, I'm sure, that's been put in. And I would be curious to know, you mentioned that there's been some training that's happened with that team, and also even just the deployment of some of the things that you talked about. what does that look like? So are you or your team or in that leadership team, are there are they running people through training classes specifically on, the basics of CI or lean deployment? What does that look like? And then even the deployment itself, are you using daily management? Are you using Kaizen events? Is it just a matter of small incremental changes over time? Continuous effort and experimentation. Like, what did that look like to go from where you started to where they are today?
Yeah, so it took a lot of work. So it really, I suppose, it started with some yellow belt training. So just to get the basics, I did come in and do some training face to face with people, but I think the yellow belt just gave people something to go back to, and it gave them all the basics when it comes to lean. So that was helpful. And then a couple of green belts trained up as well. And they then kind of worked a bit more closely with me when it came to when I was actually in on site doing work. And they learned, how to use the tools with me, like process mapping or how to do Kaizen events and all of that. So then, it was taking the reliance off me coming in, which is what I always aim to do, take the reliance off me and make the organization responsible and able to run these things themselves. So that was the way we worked, the structure of it. And then when it came to the actual, I suppose, layout of how we did it. So we looked at, first of all, following training, we looked at processes and we created a process inventory, and we looked at the processes in need of most improvement. We then created some cross-departmental groups and we got them involved and obviously practically doing the work in terms of process mapping. Where we ran into issues, we would go outside of the cross-departmental group and we go into the workshop, and we would run Kaizen events just to get more information, especially if we ran into barriers and it just wasn't working. So that they were kind of as needed. And then we did introduce much more structure into the day in terms of meetings and interactions and communication. So daily huddle was brought in every day without fail, and 5 minutes. Gemba walks were introduced. So a few different members walked around every morning, and as you know what Gemba walks are, they were able to pull out and identify, what was working well, what's not working well, and just physically see for themselves, what needed to be done. So we brought in structures like that, team meetings, monthly meetings. We set KPIs. We figured out what data was important for each processes, and we set up a data collection plan. So with very, very clear responsibilities in terms of who was responsible for collecting the data, monitoring it, and communicating it back. So we built these systems, I suppose, which took a long time to put together, but over time and with continuous, I suppose, bringing the team back to the importance of these things, they started to see the benefits of them, and then they just automatically started to do them because they felt this is valuable and this makes our workday better. And soon, they didn't actually need to be reminded to do them. It became practice. Hard in the beginning, but absolutely we got there in the end.
Yeah, amazing. And everything that you just mentioned, obviously, amazing success story, but also it ties very closely to what, I see many manufacturing organizations doing. And you're talking about being in the service industry. And obviously all of us know, the Toyota production system, again, from a manufacturing standpoint. So are there, it sounds like many similarities. Do you have any struggles or challenges in the service industry that maybe are, different than what we would see in like the manufacturing industry, for example, where lean is very well known, prevalent? Any thoughts there?
I think, the service sector is such that it's hard to get people to, as I said, down tools. It's hard to, one of the most important parts of lean is just kind of stopping and thinking and reflecting on what's happening in order to come up with a better way of doing things. And I think that's one huge challenge within the service sector. It just doesn't seem so easy for that to happen. So it is a bit of a challenge. In terms of how else it's different, I'm not really sure. I don't think it's different. I think you can bring this into any organization and it can work as long as you've got the commitment and people see the benefits of it. And you obviously need a huge buy-in from senior managers and senior leadership to make this happen as well. There may be a bit more agility needed. So I would also bring in maybe different sort of methodologies as well, and teach people a little bit about, it's great to be lean, it's great to standardize our work, but we also need to change really quickly when needed. So we need to be agile as well as lean. So perhaps there's a little bit more of that in some of the sectors I work in as well. So I think the different methodologies can complement each other as well.
Absolutely. I agree completely. And you did mention systems, that you put systems in place, and then you talked about the massive amount of leadership commitment that's necessary in order for success. So would you do with this organization, or any organization that you work with, do you find challenges in getting leadership to adopt the systems as the new way of managing their organization? Obviously we both know that leadership has a huge impact on the success of these CI success. So, how do you support leaders specifically around developing the skills that are needed to, optimize their operations and create these systems that everybody adopts and becomes the new way of doing things?
Yeah, so I am both a lean coach and I'm a leadership coach. So a big part of my time is spent doing one-to-one leadership coaching, or sometimes team coaching. And I think that is really, really important, because what I'm doing is I'm coaching leaders to understand the capabilities that they need to develop or work on in order to do things like this, lead on change and improvement in the organization. But by coaching leaders, senior leaders, what I'm doing is I'm teaching leaders what coaching is all about, and they almost learn to coach through going through a coaching program with me. They're picking up on what it is to coach somebody, how to ask powerful questions, how to listen effectively, and that's a huge part of change and improvement is those kinds of coaching behaviors. So I'm doing two things there when I'm bringing leaders through a coaching program. I'm also teaching them to coach other people, and I think that is so key. I know coaching is just one element of leadership. It's one leadership style, but I think for lean management and change in particular, coaching is so key.
It is so key. And again, in my experience, for many leaders that we work with, they were promoted into these leadership roles because, for lots of different reasons, but, many because they were really good at whatever job they were doing, not necessarily because they were good at leading people, but because they were really good at running a machine or doing whatever the job is that they were hired in to do. But they never really received any kind of, leadership development or leadership training. And so they have no idea like what to do, let alone how to coach. So I think that's a powerful piece of what you're, offering to these leaders, is that just the importance of coaching and how to coach, because, there's different coaching styles. And like you said, you mentioned listening, would say asking questions versus telling, right? Is another big piece of being a good coach, and allowing the person that you're coaching to be the one that actually comes up with a solution, or suggests the direction that you're going to head. And anything else, like how do you, from a coaching standpoint, how do you teach leaders to be a good coach? What are the things that you would say are important when it comes to leaders from a coaching standpoint?
Yeah, so what I do is in my coaching programs, I actually have these 16 competencies that it's a little kind of framework that I developed, which has all 16 different competencies that are important to be able to coach. And it has things like, emotional intelligence in there, and lots of competencies related to emotional intelligence, things like building rapport, being able to inspire people, motivate people, all these different kinds of things that I think it's really important, behaviors basically, that are really important to get really good at in order to lead on change and improvement. And so what I do is I bring people in, and actually I get them to self-assess themselves. So I get them to look at how, I suppose, competent they feel they are in all of these areas. We talk about examples of why they think that way. I ask them to go and get feedback from other people, because a lot of leaders don't actually get feedback. They'll give feedback to a lot of people, but they don't get feedback on their own behaviors. And I think that's a real gap in leadership at the moment, is what I'm seeing. So part of my programs is to really, get people to go out and ask people, what could I do differently, or bring up a situation, say, how did I handle that? Could I have done it better? So I think that's really important, is to get people understanding the important competencies, get feedback, and then be really clear on their strengths. So everybody has strengths, things that they really enjoy doing and things they should do in their day to make work enjoyable, but also, have these development areas at the top of their mind, and so really spend time getting better at certain elements of leadership, whether that is the ability to plan and schedule, or whether it's the ability to coach, or whatever it is. There's certain things that leaders always need to be working on, and I think it's really important that they know what they are.
The most dangerous phrase in our language is "we've always done it this way."
There are an awful lot of posers out there. People that do lean because they're mandated to do it. They think it will work.
How stable are you today? What are your goals? Are you generating small, simple improvements?
There are very few people that embrace lean with their full heart, head, and emotion.
Let's imagine that your current output is top-notch. Is that enough to stop innovating and stop reaching for more?
Patrick's book uncovers the essence of what those organizations look like and what the posers look like. Caution, are you in the fake zone or the real zone?
Order your copy today at avoidcontinuousappearance.com.
Sure. I love that you allow or ask them to self-assess. I think that is an important piece for sure, and is for a leader to really be able to think critically about how their how their leadership is whether they feel that they're being successful or not successful, and then actually comparing that to the feedback that you get from the people that you're managing. I remember when I was served in the U.S. military, we were mandated to get feedback from those that we were leading on our leadership style, and I was a young leader at that time, and for me it was difficult at that time. I had never asked someone how to tell me how I'm doing in my role leading you, and we had to actually talk to that person. And for me as a young leader, that was really difficult because I had never sat there and had somebody tell me, here are the things that you need to work on. And so that was very powerful for me and helpful for me as a leader. So I can see where that would be very beneficial. Out of those different competencies that you help develop in leaders, is there any one specifically that you think is the most challenging for leaders to accept and adopt and actually use that in their own leadership of team members?
It's going to sound so basic, but time management is probably one of the most important competencies to work on, because I like, if you don't have time in your day, you won't have time to do anything, including coaching or working with people or spending time with people or doing gamble walks. So time management is absolutely key. So it's part of the coaching that I bring leaders through as well, is really to assess how they're spending their own time. So how much time is going on meetings? How much time, is going into, admin tasks? So I try and break it all down and get people to really look at their time, and I get them to assess, if you weren't spending this much time on these tasks, where would you be best spending your time? And then they start talking about how they would like to spend more time with people, how they would like to coach people more and work on whatever, individual professional development plans, and do all these things that they want to do. They just say they don't have time to do them. So time management, absolutely, definitely key. When it comes to some of the other competencies, I think sometimes people struggle with just the basic tasks like planning and scheduling. They just maybe haven't got good strategies. They haven't maybe been trained properly. So that they're kind of easier ones to get better at, because it's just simple knowledge and practice. And then there's kind of harder ones like emotion intelligence and inspiring people. They obviously are not even easy to explain to people, never mind for people to get better at. So that forms a large part of our program, talking about things like self-awareness and self-management and social awareness and relationship management, and all these key pillars of just maybe learning more about yourself and working more on yourself in order to be able to help other people. So that takes a while for people to get their head around.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to time management, are there any specific tools that I just think about like leader standard work, for example, when it comes to, where leaders are spending their time or how often, how much time they're spending doing certain things. Would that be a tool that you would teach to help leaders to become better at managing their time and where they're spending their time? Are there other strategies specifically, geared towards improving a leader's time management skills that you use?
Yeah, so leader standard work is obviously a great tool, but sometimes I find that it doesn't stick with people. I think I've tried to introduce it lots of times. People find it great. They think this is super. I have a plan now. I'm going to follow this and everything's solved. And it never works out that way because people just don't stick to it. So I try to go beyond just the tools. So leader standard work is great. We put a structure, but then I say, talk about habits. So, and what support systems do we need? So let's look at, okay, so you put meetings into your calendar. Why can't we put all this other stuff into your calendar? Because your calendar is linked to your phone. You bring your phone everywhere. You put these things in, your phone will remind you when to start, when to stop. Things like that, and then also building in flexibility, because I find with leader standard work, people don't leave enough room to do, I won't say nothing, but to be flexible and to deal with whatever, again, back to the agility piece, to just deal with things that come up. And it's really, a lot of people's time is spent on reactive work, especially leaders. They seem to be, firefighting a lot, reacting a lot. And I always try to get people to not just focus on the standard jobs you have to do, but to build in time to be innovative, creative, work on the business, not in the business, and things like that. So I try and get a good balance in there. Yeah, but obviously leader standard work, it's a good tool to start off with and see how it works. It'll work for some people. It just won't work for everybody.
That's right. I don't know the exact quote, but it made me think about Mike Tyson said at one time that you can have the best plan, but the moment you get punched in the face, everything goes out the window. Not the right, not anywhere near exactly what he said, but in the military they say that you can have the best plan, but the first enemy contact, again that plan goes out the window. So I think about that with leaders. Like you can put a really, really great plan together and have this leader standard work set and go, yes, these are all the right behaviors. This is where I should be spending my time every day, every week, whatever it may be. But then you have, your boss or the customer calls or this happens or this fire pops up or whatever. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do? And so I don't know if you have any stories or experience with, a leader that would come to you and say, what do I do when, I want to put together this amazing plan. I have this amazing plan. I know what I need to do, but I come into work and then, everything just gets thrown out the window. It's all these crazy things come into that I didn't plan on. And now I'm trying to react versus being proactive, which is what, the leader standard work is supposed to do for me. So how would you tell them, or what would be your recommendations on how they deal with that, with someone that has those challenges or struggles?
Yeah, well, my first thing I always say is don't worry so much. We're all in the same boat. This is just work, basically. We're never going to get through all the things we want to get through in a day. So don't worry if you're carrying over items or, all of the work doesn't get done. Just, maybe try and make peace with that. There's a certain amount of that we have to accept. I think what's really important is that we know the priorities and we can get to the priorities in any given day. And there are little tips, like I'm working with a few leaders at the moment to try and build in those habits of taking your 10, 15 minutes in the morning, look at your day, open your tasks, look at your calendar, and, figure out from your list, a never-ending list, what would I be happy with if I can get these one or two things done today? Not all of them, just one or two, and put those things into your calendar, 2 to 4, I'm going to work on this. 12 to 1, I need to get this done. So if I can just get those 2 things done, I'll be happy. So I think, the type of world we're living in and the type of environments we're working in are just not conducive to us getting through everything. It's just not possible. So I think if we can try to change our mindset on that, I think it will be just better for everybody and better for people's mental health if we can just think that way.
Sure. Absolutely. And you talked a lot about the strategies and techniques specifically for leaders, which I think many of those probably apply to the rest of the organization, to individuals that maybe would not consider themselves in a leadership role, where they don't have a team that they're leading or whatever it may be. Would you have other strategies or techniques that you would utilize to engage and motivate people at all levels of the organization, that again maybe are listening in, who wouldn't consider themselves in a leadership role, although many people, I would say most people working at an organization are leaders, but in a lot of the things that you mentioned probably would be similar, effective tools and techniques. But anything specifically that you would say, outside of leadership strategies, techniques that could help with other people in an organization?
Yeah, well, communication is obviously key. I think some people just take it upon themselves, and things build up in their heads, and they feel that pressure, to be perfect and get everything done. But I think having just really good communication networks, whether it's with your manager or with your colleagues, build in those quick check-ins every day, like the huddle sort of thing. Quick check-in where you talk about what it is I'm going to plan on doing today. What are my priorities? What's everybody else's priorities? Let's have a conversation about that. Let's get it out there. What are the issues? Let's get them on the table. And I think if you do that, it just makes you feel better about yourself. And also there's more transparency in the organization about what's happening. So I think the quick check-ins regularly are really, really important. And then for anybody, I suppose, trying to manage themselves a little bit better, and obviously people want to make an impression, especially if they want to move into leadership positions. So I think then it's really important that if you have a leader who is very good at initiating conversations and performance reviews and coaching, it's great, because they'll kind of build you up and help you that way. But a lot of people don't have that. They don't have leaders who'll initiate these things. So I would say it's really important to initiate those conversations yourself, and to continuously go to your manager and say, what are your expectations of me? What's the company's expectations of me? And also, by the way, I have a few expectations, and, can we have a chat about those? And I think doing that regularly in those kind of coaching conversations is really, really important for people's productivity, people's development, and just morale in general.
Sure. No, that's great feedback, and that was going to be my next question was, when, for those people that are listening in that, that don't have leaders that are being proactive in that area, and, setting up coaching sessions, or, initiating huddles or whatever it may be. So thank you for going in that direction. And I want to just expand on that just a little bit and ask, is there anything else that, individual, because there's so many people that are listening in that are in organizations where, maybe leadership isn't fully committed to continuous improvement, or, maybe there's a lot of turnover in leadership, and there's new leaders coming in, and people getting promoted, and lots of changes happening. What would be your advice to someone listening that, is like, oh my gosh, I know that this is the right direction for our organization. I know that, these lean techniques, that CI is the right way to manage this company. And I want to, as I grow in this company, I want to be that kind of leader. Any advice that you would give to someone that is just starting out, or in a position like that, where they have those types of challenges?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is to stay calm, because a lot of people in that situation get frustrated. And what happens is they try and communicate a better way of doing things to people coming in the door, but all people hear and see is their emotion and their frustration. They're not actually getting their message across. So I would say, if you have those ideas and suggestions, you need to get clear on what they are. You need to, evidence base, what you're saying. You need to put your suggestions together in a very clear and concise way, that it's almost like an argument that you're putting forward. But obviously then, by staying calm and delivering that message in a professional manner, and also finding the platforms through which, the meetings meetings or whatever it is that, that you can come into and deliver that message effectively. All of that is really important as well. And just being consistently, I suppose, trying to get that message across, and obviously building good relationships with people who will then be more likely to listen to you. So, it's not about going in all guns blazing. It is about being calm, but also being very professional, respectful, and consistent. And I think then you're more likely to be able to influence whether it's your colleagues or upper levels of management.
Yeah. And I like that you said for individuals to be brave enough to say, here are some of the expectations that I have, in for myself in my role, and even asking the question, how do you determine success for my role? How do you see me doing well? How do we measure that? So that I know whether I'm at the end of my day, at the end of my week, did I have a good day? Did I have a good week? So actually taking that the initiative to ask those questions. And when it comes to measuring the effectiveness, not just for an individual, but I would say, for lean, for leadership development initiatives, what are some different ways that we can measure effectiveness within an organization or as an individual, either or? Because what the ultimate goal is long-term sustainment of these initiatives and long-term change, and getting the organization to move in a positive direction for the long term. So how do you measure the effectiveness of lean and leadership development within organizations?
Yeah, so for me, it's about, like I said earlier, building in those systems and just being clear on, let's say, the who, what, where, when, why. So bringing it back down to basics. So if there's something that, you've introduced a process change, and there's changes in a process that you're expecting people to follow and do differently. So for example, it could be picking and packing in the workshop, and you've introduced something that's actually made the picking process a lot faster, and people have started to do it, but then again, you don't want it to fall down. So I think it's really important that, obviously the data around that is important. We have to find very simple ways that if there's a change, we've got to be able to measure it in some way. So it's about the team coming up with how they're going to measure it. I would never go in and say, here's what you need to do to measure this. I would task the team with finding a way to figure out if this change has helped them or not. And once the team identify it, they're much more likely to, whether it's a checklist or a whiteboard or an online form or whatever it is, a qualitative feedback sometimes, whatever it is, you task the team with being, very clear on who is going to, document this data. And then it's a case of, right, well, we know now, let's say we could have 10, 20, 30 different changes over a number of months. So it could be all small, it could be big, but we need to find ways to measure a lot of these things. We want to know, maybe not everything, but we want to know about some of these changes. So we need to figure out, okay, the accountability around this, and who's going to do what, who's going to measure, who's going to monitor, who's going to analyze, and what are the platforms through which we're going to feed back this information to inform our continuous improvement approach. And that's where you've got to look at like the daily systems, the weekly, the monthly, the quarterly, the annually, and you figure out and you match, where the data fits into each of those platforms. And as long as there's accountability there and very clear owners of that sort of data analysis and feedback, then I think that we're in a good position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and making decisions based on data, and that's obviously the right approach. So for those organizations, for those individuals that are listening in that don't have measures in place, I think that's a great place to start, is just asking yourself, how do you determine success for this particular process or for this? And also, I don't know, what you would say around leading and lagging measures for an organization, because that's important too. Obviously, if you're only looking at lagging measures, then you're always being reactive. And so, understanding, backing that up a bit and asking yourself, what are the leading measures? What are the things that are really going to affect the lagging measures, I think is important too. Any experience with that, or any suggestions around, those organizations that maybe don't have measures in place, and what should they be looking at when it comes to how to determine success?
Yeah, and look, I don't think you can just pull measures out of the sky and say these seem great. Let's just use these. I think it's sort of all aligned. So your lean work, your continuous improvement work will be linked to your strategic goals, ideally. If you have 2 or 3, 4 strategic goals in your organization, you look at how lean management can help you with those. And then when it comes down to, you get into lean management, you start looking at processes, you start figuring out, which are the really important key performance indicators aligned to maybe some of these more important processes that we really need to have targets set on, or that we really, in order to support our strategic plan, we really need these, measures, we really need things to change here. So I think that's where obviously, targets can come in, and there obviously teams can be energized towards working towards targets. And I think maybe that's a metric that comes in less regularly, but should still be in the background as well for teams to come back to and compare, and even just learn from saying, okay, we set out to do this. We thought we could do this. Why couldn't we? Why couldn't we get to this point? And it's okay if we didn't, but why do we think we could? Why were we so ambitious here? What got in the way? So I think having those kind of leading and lagging measures are really important for those kinds of learning and lessons learned conversations as well.
Yeah. And also, I've worked with organizations where, they have so many measures and so much data that it almost becomes overwhelming. It's they've complexified things so much that, people don't even know, what direction they need to go in. So, another suggestion would be, especially starting out, or I guess even if you do find yourself in that place where you have so many measures, maybe simplifying things and making sure that people understand how their work directly affects those long-term goals for the organization. And, and you can do that just simply by going and asking them, how do you determine success for your day? And, how is that aligned with some of our long-term goals as an organization? But sometimes, especially, at frontline employees, it needs to be very simple, and they need to know exactly how the work that they're doing directly connects to the long-term work that the organization is doing. So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate everything that you've laid out today is super helpful. It's been a great conversation. Catherine, you are also working on launching a website with some really, really great information and some great content for individuals. Can you tell us just a little bit about that, and kind of direct us to how listeners can connect with you, and what's the best way for them to plug in with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So this is something I've been working on for a couple of months. I've always worked through LinkedIn, I suppose. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I get a lot of my business and my clients through LinkedIn. But I suppose I've come to the realization that, yeah, I probably do need a website. And in fairness, it's a lean way to work to have a website so that people can, see my services, can kind of, avail of them online. And I will also be selling online courses through my website as well. And also people will be able to book coaching sessions with me. So it's better for my clients if I have a website. So I realize that. So it probably will be live I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll find me pretty quickly. If you look up Catherine McDonald and MCD Coach Consult is where you'll find me at. And I think, in the next few weeks, I will be launching, that website. And if you just keep an eye on that, that's probably the best way to keep in touch with me.
Sure. And you offer virtual coaching or only in-person coaching?
Oh yeah, virtual. I mean, I will always try and get out to see somebody once if they are within driving distance, but Ireland's pretty small. But I do have more international clients as well that I just do virtual coaching with, and it works quite well as well. It's I'm very visual in my coaching sessions, and I've used a lot of visual tools as well, so it works quite well.
Very nice. Technology is amazing, isn't it?
So good. Yeah, we're so lucky.
Catherine, it's been great to have you on. I obviously love the work that you're doing and just appreciate you as a leadership coach, as a lean coach. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And, again, we will drop your contact information into the show notes. So if anyone's interested to get in connection with Catherine, you can go right to the show notes and find her contact information there and reach out to her. So Catherine, thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, Patrick. It's been absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.